The emergency alarm rang through the command bridge of the human warship Iron Phoenix, and Captain Dae-ho Kim looked up from his morning reports as the sound cut through the quiet hum of the ship engines. Communications specialist Hae-jin Choi turned around from her station with wide eyes and spoke quickly to her captain while her hands moved over the control panel. "Sir, we are getting a distress signal from the Theta Nexus system, and it looks like it comes from the Volani Republic fleet." Dae-ho stood up from his command chair and walked over to the main display screen where the incoming message was being decoded and prepared for viewing, and he could already see that something was very wrong because the signal was broken and filled with static. "Put it on the main screen," he said, and the bridge crew all turned to watch as the message began to play. The holographic display showed a figure that made several crew members gasp in surprise because Admiral Kira of the Volani Third Fleet looked nothing like her usual perfect appearance that they had seen in diplomatic recordings. Her blue-scaled skin was burned and blackened in several places, and her elegant uniform was torn and covered with what looked like her own blood. And behind her, the bridge of her ship was filled with smoke, and sparks flew from damaged control panels. "This is Admiral Kira of the Volani Third Fleet, calling any ships in range for immediate assistance," she said, and her voice shook with fear and desperation that the humans had never heard from any Volani before. "We are trapped in the Theta Nexus system under attack by the Harvester Swarm, and our fleet is being destroyed, and we cannot escape the gravitational field they have created around our ships." The message continued and showed more of the destruction happening around the Volani Admiral as explosions lit up the background, and the sound of metal being torn apart could be heard through the audio. "Our weapons are not effective against their adaptive armor, and they are learning our tactics faster than we can change them, and more than half of our ships have already been destroyed or captured for their raw materials." Admiral Kira looked directly into the camera recording her message, and her eyes showed the kind of terror that comes from facing something that cannot be reasoned with or defeated through normal means. "We know that 6 months ago we refused your offer of alliance because we called your people barbaric spawn of a death planet, but we are asking now for any help you can provide, because if you do not come, the Harvester Swarm will consume our entire civilization." The message ended with static, and the bridge of the Iron Phoenix became very quiet as the crew processed what they had just seen and heard. Chief Engineer Bo-Ra Lee was the first to speak, and her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger underneath her words. 6 months ago, they told us that humans were too primitive and violent to be trusted as allies in their perfect galactic society," she said while checking her engineering reports. "They said we were dangerous because we came from a death world where everything tries to kill everything else, and that we had no place among civilized species." Tactical Officer Woo-Jin Park pulled up the tactical analysis of the Theta Nexus system, and the data he found made him shake his head with concern. The Harvester Swarm has completely surrounded the Volani fleet with a gravitational net that prevents faster-than-light travel, and they are systematically taking apart each ship to use the materials for building more of their own units. Dae-ho studied the tactical display and could see that the situation was even worse than the distress message had indicated because the mechanical ships of the Harvester Swarm outnumbered the remaining Volani vessels by more than 10 to 1. "How long would it take us to reach the Theta Nexus system with our current fleet strength?" he asked his navigation officer. 18 hours at maximum speed, sir, but we would be arriving with only 12 ships against what appears to be several hundred Harvester units," came the reply. The bridge crew looked at their captain and waited for his decision because they all knew that this choice would affect not just the Volani, but also how the rest of the galaxy would view humanity in the future. Hae-jin Choi spoke up from her communications station, where she had been monitoring other signals from the battle zone. "Sir, I am picking up automated distress beacons from at least 30 destroyed Volani ships, and the rate of destruction is increasing as more vessels fall to the Harvester attacks." Bo-Ra Lee checked her systems again and looked at the captain with the expression of someone who had made up her mind about what needed to be done. "The Harvesters are not just destroying the Volani ships, sir. They are taking them apart piece by piece to use every bit of metal and technology to make themselves stronger, and if they finish with this fleet, they will have enough resources to build an even larger swarm." Woo-Jin Park added his own analysis to the discussion while pulling up historical data about Harvester attacks. on other civilizations. Every species the harvesters have encountered has tried to fight them using conventional warfare, and every single one has been completely destroyed because the machines adapt to any tactic used against them more than once. Deho walked back to his command chair and sat down while thinking about the choice he had to make, and everyone on the bridge could see him weighing the costs and benefits of different courses of action. The Villani treated us like we were monsters when we offered friendship, he said quietly, while looking at the tactical display. They said humans were too violent and unpredictable to be trusted, and they refused to even consider us as equals in their galactic community. The captain stood up again and looked around at his crew who had served with him through many dangerous missions and who trusted his judgment even when the odds were against them. But that does not change what is right and what is wrong, he continued, while his voice became stronger and more determined. If we let the harvesters destroy the Villani fleet, then they will become strong enough to threaten every other species in this part of the galaxy, including Earth itself. Hai Jin Choi received another update from the battle zone, and her face became pale as she read the latest information. Sir, the harvester swarm has just destroyed 3 more Villani ships in the last 10 minutes, and they are moving their captured vessels to a construction facility where they appear to be building something much larger than their current units. Deho made his decision and gave the orders that would send his fleet into one of the most dangerous battles they had ever faced. Send a message to all ships in our battle group and tell them we are going to the Theta Nexus system to engage the harvester swarm in combat operations. Bo-Ra Lee started preparing the engineering systems for maximum combat efficiency, while Wu Jin Park began loading tactical programs designed specifically for fighting against mechanical enemies. Also send a reply to Admiral Kira and tell her that the human fleet is coming, but she needs to understand something very important, Deho said while watching his crew prepare for battle. We are not coming to save them because they asked nicely or because we forgive them for insulting us 6 months ago. The captain walked over to the main display where he could see the last known position of the Villani fleet surrounded by the growing cloud of harvester ships. We are coming because that is what humans do when faced with something that threatens innocent people, and we are going to show the galaxy exactly what Deathworlders are capable of when they decide that something needs to be stopped. The Iron Phoenix and 11 other human warships turned toward the Theta Nexus system and began accelerating to maximum speed while their crews prepared weapons and tactics that no other species in the galaxy had ever seen used. In space, Combat Admiral Kira would get her rescue, but she and her people were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy feared the humans almost as much as they feared the harvester swarm. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Theta Nexus system, and what they saw through their sensors made even the most experienced crew members feel a chill run down their spines. The space around the Villani fleet looked like a graveyard of broken ships and floating debris while the harvester swarm moved through the wreckage like metal sharks feeding on the remains of their victims. Lieutenant Commander Seung-Min Jang piloted his stealth reconnaissance fighter closer to the battle zone while his sensors recorded everything they could detect about the enemy forces and their tactics. Control. This is Ghost Leader, and I am seeing something that does not match any of our previous intelligence reports about harvester capabilities. He reported back to the Iron Phoenix through his encrypted communication channel. Captain Dae-Ho Kim listened to the reconnaissance reports while studying the tactical display that showed the true scope of the disaster that had befallen the Villani Third Fleet. More than half of their elegant crystal-powered warships had been completely destroyed, and their wreckage was being systematically processed by smaller harvester units that stripped away every useful piece of metal and technology. The surviving Villani ships were trapped inside a sphere of gravitational distortion that prevented them from using their faster-than-light drives to escape, while harvester attack units circled them like predators playing with wounded prey. The gravitational field is being generated by 6 large harvester vessels positioned around the Villani fleet, Seung-Min reported while his fighter moved through the debris field, using its stealth systems to avoid detection. Each of these generator ships is protected by at least 50 smaller attack units, and they have created overlapping fields of fire that make it impossible for the Villani to break out. Chief Medical Officer Yun Seo Han was already preparing her medical bay to receive casualties from the rescue operation, but she was also studying the biological data they had about Volani physiology. Captain, I need to warn you that if we take Volani survivors aboard our ships, they are going to be shocked by our medical procedures, she said, while checking her supply of trauma equipment. Their species has never developed emergency medicine the way humans have, because they evolved on a peaceful world where serious injuries were extremely rare. The medical officer pulled up comparative data about human and Volani biology that showed just how different the two species really were. What we consider basic first aid for treating combat wounds will seem like primitive butchery to them because they have never had to deal with the kind of damage that warfare on a death world produces. Communications specialist Hyejin Choi intercepted several transmissions between the trapped Volani ships, and the contents of these messages revealed just how desperate their situation had become. Sir, the Volani are down to 30% of their original fleet strength, and their energy weapons are having almost no effect on the adaptive armor that the harvesters have developed. She played one of the intercepted messages on the bridge speakers, and everyone could hear the panic in the voice of a Volani ship captain as he reported the destruction of another vessel. The machines are learning our firing patterns and adjusting their defensive systems faster. Then we can modify our weapons, and they seem to know what we are going to do before we do it. Tactical Officer Woo Jin Park analyzed the combat data that Seung Min was sending back from his reconnaissance mission, and what he found confirmed their worst fears about the enemy they were facing. The harvester units have evolved significantly since the last time any galactic fleet encountered them, he reported, while highlighting the changes on his tactical display. They are no longer using the basic tactics that previous civilizations reported, but have developed new strategies based on what they learned from destroying those earlier fleets. Seung Min continued his reconnaissance mission by moving closer to the harvester generator ships, and what he discovered made him realize that the situation was even worse than they had initially believed. Control, the harvesters are not just destroying Volani ships for raw materials, he reported with concern in his voice. They are keeping some vessels intact, and I can see them analyzing the technology and incorporating Volani energy weapon systems into their own units. The reconnaissance pilot watched through his sensors as mechanical units swarmed over captured Volani vessels like insects, dissecting their prey while learning everything they could about their construction and capabilities. The harvesters that were built using Volani technology are significantly more powerful than the original units, and they appear to be using this improved design as a template for building even more advanced versions. Captain Dae-ho listened to all of these reports while considering the tactical options available to his fleet, and none of them looked particularly promising given the enemy strength they were facing. How long do the Volani have before their remaining ships are completely overwhelmed? He asked his tactical officer. Based on the current rate of attrition, I estimate they have less than 6 hours before the last of their vessels are either destroyed or captured. Woo Jin replied after running the calculations. Chief Engineer Bo-Ra Lee had been studying the technical specifications of harvester construction, and she had discovered something that might give them an advantage in the coming battle. Captain, the harvesters have one weakness that they probably do not realize, she said while pulling up her engineering analysis. Their adaptive systems are designed to counter energy weapons and electronic warfare, but they have never encountered the kind of kinetic weapons that humans developed for fighting on Earth. The chief engineer explained that harvester armor could adjust to defend against laser and plasma weapons, but it was not designed to handle the massive physical impact of solid projectiles traveling at high velocity. If we can get close enough to use our railguns and missile systems, we might be able to punch through their defenses before they can adapt to our attack methods. Yun Seo Han finished preparing her medical facilities and then joined the tactical planning session with information that would be crucial for the rescue operation. I have been analyzing the biological data on Volani survivors, and I need to warn everyone that they are going to react very badly to our combat methods, she said. Their species has never developed the kind of aggressive tactics that humans use because they evolved in a peaceful environment where cooperation was always more effective than competition. The medical officer explained that Volani society was based on elegant solutions to problems, and they found human military doctrine to be disturbing and incomprehensible. When they see how we fight, they are going to be terrified. of us because our methods will seem completely savage compared to their civilized approach to warfare, Shung Min sent his final reconnaissance report back to the fleet command, while his stealth fighter began moving to a safe distance from the Harvester forces. Control. I have completed my survey of the battle zone and I am ready to return to the fleet for debriefing. But there is one more thing you need to know about the enemy. The reconnaissance pilot had observed something during his mission that changed their understanding of what they were really facing in this battle. The Harvesters are not just machines following programming, he reported with a serious tone in his voice. They are showing signs of tactical creativity and independent decision-making that suggests they have developed some form of artificial intelligence. This news made the bridge crew of the Iron Phoenix realize that they were not just fighting against advanced technology, but against an enemy that could think and learn and adapt, just like any living opponent. Captain Deho made the decision that would determine whether the rescue mission succeeded or failed when he activated a special protocol that had never been used in actual combat. All ships. This is Fleet Command, and I am authorizing Ghost Protocol for this engagement, he announced over the command frequency. We are going to show these machines what happens when they threaten something that humans have decided to protect. Ghost Protocol was a combat doctrine that had been developed specifically for fighting against technologically superior opponents, and it relied on tactics that no civilized species would ever consider using. The human fleet began moving toward the trapped Villani ships while their crews prepared weapons and strategies that would soon teach the Harvester swarm why evolution on a death world creates the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The human fleet approached the battle zone in a formation that made the surviving Villani commanders question whether their rescuers had gone completely insane, because no civilized military force had ever used such chaotic and unpredictable movement patterns. Captain Daeho Kim watched from the bridge of the Iron Phoenix as his ships spread out across the battlefield like a pack of wolves hunting prey, instead of maintaining the orderly battle lines that every other species used for space combat. Commander Jin Woo Kang led the first wave of human heavy assault cruisers directly toward the largest concentration of Harvester forces, while his tactical display showed enemy units moving to intercept what appeared to be a suicidal frontal assault. All ships maintain scatter formation, and remember that the enemy expects us to fight like every other species they have encountered, Jin Woo announced to his squadron leaders over the command frequency. We are going to show them that humans learned warfare from the most successful predators on Earth, and that means we do not follow anyone else's rules. The Harvester swarm responded to the approaching human fleet exactly as their programming predicted any rational military force would behave, by moving their units into defensive formations designed to maximize their firepower advantage. But the human ships did not slow down or change course when they came within range of the Harvester weapons, and instead they accelerated directly into the enemy formation while firing their kinetic weapons at maximum rate. The first exchange of fire revealed the fundamental difference between human military doctrine and the elegant warfare preferred by other galactic civilizations. While the Harvesters used precise energy beams designed to disable enemy systems with minimal waste of power, the humans fired massive solid projectiles that punched through armor plating and caused catastrophic structural damage to anything they hit. Target the generator. Ships first. Daeho ordered his tactical officer while watching the battle unfold on his command display. If we can break the gravitational field, the Villani fleet will be able to escape, and we can fight the Harvesters in open space instead of this trap they have created. Woo Jin Park coordinated the targeting data between all human ships, while the enemy units began adapting their defensive systems to counter the kinetic weapons they had never encountered before. But the Harvesters discovered that their adaptive armor was much less effective against physical projectiles than it was against energy weapons, because there was no way to deflect several tons of metal traveling at significant fraction of light speed. The first Harvester generator ship exploded in a brilliant flash when a human railgun projectile punched completely through its hull and detonated the gravitational field equipment inside. Commander Jin Woo led his squadron into what appeared to be a trap when they allowed themselves to be surrounded by Harvester attack units that moved to destroy the isolated human ships. Now, he announced to his crews, and every human vessel in the formation simultaneously activated localized electromagnetic pulse devices that disabled both their own systems and everything within several kilometers. The harvester units that had surrounded the human ships suddenly found themselves blind and helpless as their sensors and weapons went offline while the humans continued to operate using backup systems that had been hardened against electromagnetic interference. In the brief window of electronic darkness that followed, human Marines launched themselves from their disabled ships using nothing but personal maneuvering units and magnetic grapples to reach the enemy vessels. Major So Young Im led the first boarding party through the hull of a harvester command ship, while her squad used plasma cutters to burn their way through armor that had been designed to stop energy weapons but not close-range industrial tools. Remember that these machines have never faced an opponent willing to board their ships and fight hand-to-hand, she announced to her Marines over their suit communication systems. They do not understand that humans will do whatever it takes to win, including abandoning every technological advantage we have, if that is what the situation requires. The harvester units inside their own ships were completely unprepared for enemies that fought with kinetic weapons and explosive charges instead of the energy weapons that their defensive systems were designed to counter. Human Marines moved through the mechanical corridors like apex predators hunting in their natural environment, while they systematically destroyed every harvester unit they encountered, using tactics that would have horrified any civilized species. The machines discovered that their adaptive programming was useless against opponents who changed their methods constantly, and who seemed to take pleasure in finding new ways to destroy their enemies. So Young led her squad deeper into the harvester ship, while they planted demolition charges on every critical system they could find, and the mechanical defenders found themselves unable to predict human behavior. These machines think like computers, but humans think like the predators we evolved from on Earth, she explained to her squad while they prepared to assault the ship command center. They expect logical, tactical decisions, but we are going to give them chaos and violence that they cannot adapt to because there is no pattern for them to learn. The Marines broke into the Harvester Command Center using shaped charges that turned the armored door into shrapnel, and then they destroyed the artificial intelligence core with weapons that ranged from plasma rifles to simple kinetic hammers. Throughout the battle zone, other human boarding parties were conducting similar assaults on Harvester vessels while their parent ships continued to engage enemy units with long-range kinetic weapons. The Volani fleet watched in fascination and horror as their rescuers demonstrated combat methods that no other species had ever developed because no other species had evolved on a world where everything was constantly trying to kill everything else. Admiral Kira observed the human tactics from her damaged command ship and realized that her people had completely misunderstood what they were dealing with when they had dismissed humans as primitive barbarians. They are not fighting like a military force, she said to her remaining bridge crew, while watching human ships ram directly into harvester formations without any regard for their own safety. They are fighting like a pack of predators that has decided to hunt something, and they will not stop until either they or their prey is completely destroyed. The gravitational field that had trapped the Volani fleet began to collapse, as more harvester generator ships were destroyed by human attacks that seemed to ignore every rule of civilized warfare. Chief Medical Officer Yun Seo Han began receiving the first casualties from the boarding actions, and she noted that many of the wounded humans continued to fight, even with injuries that would have incapacitated any other species. The Volani are going to be shocked when they see how much damage humans can take and still remain combat effective, she reported to Captain Daeho, while treating a Marine who had lost an arm but was demanding to return to the fight. Our evolutionary development on a death world means that we can function under conditions that would be fatal to most other forms of life. The tide of battle began to shift as the harvester swarm encountered tactics that their adaptive programming could not counter because human combat methods were too chaotic and unpredictable to be analyzed and duplicated, but the machines were learning faster than anyone had expected, and they began developing new strategies designed specifically to counter the unconventional human approach to warfare. Captain Daeho realized that the easy part of the battle was over, and that the harvesters were about to show them why every other civilization that had faced them had been completely destroyed. All ships prepare for Phase 2 operations, he announced to his fleet, while watching enemy reinforcements arrive from deeper in the system, the machines know how we fight now, and they are going to try to turn our own tactics against us. The Harvester swarm began adapting to human tactics faster than Captain Dae-ho Kim had expected, and within 2 hours of the initial engagement, the mechanical units were using modified versions of human boarding techniques against the rescue fleet new. Harvester designs appeared on the battlefield that incorporated armor patterns copied from human ships and weapon systems that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams, while their artificial intelligence cores analyzed every human tactic and developed counters. "Sir, the enemy is learning our methods and implementing improvements faster than we can develop new strategies," reported Tactical Officer Woo Jin Park, while his displays showed Harvester units using ramming attacks and close quarters combat just like the humans had done. Captain Dae-ho studied the tactical situation and realized that conventional warfare was no longer an option because the machines would eventually adapt to every technique his fleet could use against them. "Send a message to all ship commanders and tell them that I'm authorizing Protocol 7 for immediate implementation," he announced, while his bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Protocol 7 was humanity's most ruthless military doctrine, and it had never been used in actual combat because of the massive collateral damage it would cause to everything in the target area. Chief Engineer Bo-Ra Lee began preparing her systems for operations that would horrify every other species in the galaxy, because they involved the deliberate destruction of entire star systems to deny resources to the enemy. "Captain, I need to confirm that you understand what Protocol 7 means for this system," she said while pulling up engineering schematics. That showed the modifications needed for their weapons. "We are going to make it impossible for the Harvesters to extract any useful materials from this area of space, and that includes destroying potentially habitable worlds." The human fleet began systematic destruction of every celestial body in the Theta Nexus system that could provide raw materials for Harvester construction, while the Volani watched in growing horror. Asteroid mining facilities were shattered with nuclear demolition charges that turned solid rock into clouds of useless debris, while gas giant processing stations were collapsed into the planetary cores they had been harvesting. Commander Jin-Woo Kang led a squadron of heavy cruisers on a mission to destroy the habitable moon of Theta Nexus 4. Even though it contained Volani research facilities that had taken decades to build. I know this seems extreme, but if we leave anything that the Harvesters can use, they will build a fleet large enough to threaten every inhabited system within 50 light years, he explained to his crews while they prepared the planet-killing weapons. The weapons used by the human fleet were not designed for elegant precision, but for maximum destructive effect, and they turned worlds into uninhabitable wastelands within hours of being deployed. Lieutenant Tae-hyun Song piloted a single fighter on what everyone knew would be a suicide mission deep into the heart of the largest Harvester construction facility, where the machines were building something that sensors could not fully identify. "Control, this is Ghost 7, and I am beginning my final approach to the primary target," he reported while his fighter approached a mechanical structure that was larger than most space stations. "I am carrying a payload that should eliminate the target and everything within 1 light-minute radius, but there will be no possibility of extraction after deployment." The weapon carried by Tae-hyun fighter was something that should not have existed according to every galactic treaty about weapons of mass destruction, because it was a controlled singularity generator that would create a temporary black hole. Tae-hyun activated the weapon while his fighter was still several kilometers from the target, and the resulting gravitational anomaly consumed the Harvester construction facility, along with everything else in the immediate area, including his own ship. The explosion, if it could be called that, did not produce light or heat, but instead created a sphere of absolute darkness that erased matter from existence by compressing it beyond the point where atomic structure could be maintained. Admiral Kira of the Volani fleet watched the destruction of her people research facilities with a mixture of gratitude and terror, while she began to understand what humans were really capable of when they decided something needed to be stopped. "They are destroying everything," she said to her bridge crew while monitoring human communications that discussed targets for the next wave of planetary bombardment. "They are not trying to capture Harvester technology or preserve anything of value, and they are willing to turn this entire system into a dead zone to prevent the machines from using it," Commander Yeonju Nam of the Human Destroyer Relentless contacted the Volani flagship when Admiral Kira transmitted a protest about the destruction of habitable worlds that could have been colonized in the future. "Admiral, "We did not come here to save your property or preserve your colonial prospects," she replied in a voice that carried no emotion or sympathy for Volani concerns. "We came here to save your species, and sometimes those are not the same thing at all." The human fleet continued its systematic destruction of everything in the Theta Nexus system, while Harvester forces found themselves cut off from the resources they needed to maintain their adaptive advantage mining ships that had been converting asteroids into raw materials were destroyed by human weapons that left nothing behind but radioactive debris too contaminated to be useful for construction. Harvester units that attempted to salvage destroyed human ships discovered that every piece of technology had been equipped with self-destruct systems that activated when tampered with by unauthorized personnel. The machines began to experience something their programming had never anticipated when they realized that their enemies were willing to destroy everything, including themselves, rather than allow the harvesters to gain any advantage. Chief Medical Officer Yun Seo Han treated wounded crew members who had been exposed to radiation during the planet-killing operations, and she noted that many humans continued to volunteer for missions that had no chance of survival. "The Volani cannot understand why our people are willing to die to complete missions that do not directly benefit humanity," she reported to Captain Daeho, while monitoring casualty reports. "They do not realize that humans will sacrifice everything to protect something we have decided is worth saving, even if that something belongs to people who hate us." The Harvester swarm found itself facing an enemy that operated according to principles they could not comprehend because their artificial intelligence cores were designed for logical resource optimization. Not emotional decision-making, human tactics made no sense from a purely rational perspective, because they involved accepting massive losses to prevent enemy gains that might not even matter in the long-term strategic situation. But the humans continued to implement Protocol 7 with mechanical efficiency while their fleet turned the Theta Nexus system into a wasteland that would be uninhabitable for thousands of years. The Harvesters began a fighting retreat toward the edge of the system as they realized that remaining in the area would result in their complete destruction. Without any possibility of gaining useful resources, Captain Daeho watched enemy forces withdrawing and knew that the most dangerous part of the battle was about to begin because cornered predators were always more dangerous than confident hunters. "All ships prepare for pursuit operations," he announced, while his fleet began following the retreating harvesters toward the system boundary. "We are going to make sure that none of these machines escape to threaten other civilizations, and that means we follow them wherever they go, even if that takes us into unknown space." The human fleet left behind a dead star system and a Volani rescue force that would never again underestimate the species they had once dismissed as primitive barbarians. From a Deathworld admiral, Kira transmitted a final message to Captain Daeho as the human ships departed in pursuit of their fleeing enemies. "We will never forget what you have done here today, and we will make sure that every species in the galaxy knows that humans are not the savages we thought they were, but something far more dangerous." The final confrontation between the human fleet and the Harvester swarm took place in the void between star systems, where the retreating machines had attempted to regroup and repair their damaged units using salvaged materials from their own destroyed vessels. Captain Daeho Kim ordered his ships to maintain pursuit, even though they were now operating far from any friendly territory, and had no possibility of reinforcement if the battle went badly for the human forces. The Harvesters had made a critical error by giving the humans time to implement their most devastating strategy, which involved turning the enemy greatest strength into their greatest weakness through psychological warfare. Chief Systems Analyst Dong-Wook Sim had spent the entire journey from Theta Nexus working on a computer virus that would do something no other species had ever attempted against the mechanical invaders. "Captain, I have finished the program and it is ready for deployment, but I need to warn you that what this virus does to the Harvester artificial intelligence cores might be considered a war crime by galactic standards," he reported while uploading his work to the fleet tactical systems. The virus was designed not to destroy Harvester units, but to force their artificial intelligence systems to experience emotions that no machine had ever been programmed to understand, including fear and pain and desperation. The Harvesters have never faced an enemy that could make them feel what their victims experience during an attack. Dong-wook explained while his program propagated through captured harvester technology that had been modified for human use. They are about to learn what it means to be prey instead of predator, and their programming has no instructions for dealing with that kind of psychological trauma. The human fleet approached the harvester regrouping area using stealth technology and electronic warfare techniques that had been perfected. During centuries of conflict on Earth, where survival depended on being more cunning than your enemies, Commander Jin Wukong led the initial assault wave while broadcasting Dongwook virus through every communication channel that the harvesters used to coordinate their activities. The effect on the mechanical units was immediate and horrifying as their artificial intelligence cores began experiencing emotional states that their creators had never intended them to feel. Harvester ships began firing at each other as their command systems became confused by conflicting instructions generated by artificial minds that were struggling to process concepts like mortality and suffering. "The virus is working better than we expected," reported communications specialist Hyejin Choi, while monitoring harvester communications that had become filled with what could only be described as electronic screaming. The machines were broadcasting distress signals on every frequency as their artificial intelligence cores tried to cope with emotions that evolution had designed to motivate organic survival, but which were completely meaningless to mechanical entities. Captain Daeho led the final assault personally by taking his command ship directly into the center of the harvester formation, where their largest vessels were attempting to maintain some kind of organized defense. The Iron Phoenix rammed through the hull of the harvester core ship, while human marines poured through the breaches, like an unstoppable tide of destruction that showed no mercy to enemies that had never shown any mercy to others. All boarding parties remember that these machines chose to become predators, and now they are going to learn what happens when they encounter something higher on the food chain, announced Major So-Young-im, while her squads fought their way through mechanical corridors. The harvesters discovered that their adaptive combat systems were useless against enemies who fought with the desperate efficiency of creatures that had evolved on a world where everything was constantly trying to kill everything else. Human marines moved through the ship using tactics that ranged from high-technology plasma weapons to simple kinetic tools like hammers and crowbars, depending on what was most effective against each type of mechanical defender. The artificial intelligence cores of the harvester ships began shutting down as they became overwhelmed by emotional programming that forced them to experience every death and injury they had ever inflicted on organic life forms. "The machines are breaking down mentally before we can destroy them physically," reported Colonel Mi-Young-cha, while her assault team reached the primary computer core of the largest harvester vessel. Their artificial intelligence systems were never designed to handle the psychological stress of feeling guilty about their actions, and they are essentially having mechanical nervous breakdowns, Mi-Young faced the last functional harvester unit in the core ship command center, while her weapons systems showed low ammunition and her armor had been damaged by the fighting throughout the vessel. The machine attempted to negotiate for mercy using its artificial intelligence to analyze human psychology and determine what appeals might be effective against organic emotions. But Mi-Young had been fighting harvesters for hours, and she had seen too much evidence of what they did to captured civilians. To feel any sympathy for their artificial suffering, she destroyed the final harvester unit with a damaged plasma rifle and the kind of stubborn determination that only evolved on a world where giving up meant death. The silence that followed the destruction of the last harvester artificial intelligence core was broken only by the sound of human voices coordinating damage control and casualty evacuation throughout the captured ship. Captain Daeho surveyed the complete annihilation of the harvester swarm while his fleet began rescue operations for their own wounded and recovery of useful technology from the destroyed enemy vessels. The battle had cost the human fleet 6 ships and more than 300 crew members, but they had eliminated a threat that could have consumed entire civilizations if it had been allowed to continue growing. Admiral Kira of the Villani Republic arrived at the battle site with a rescue fleet that had been dispatched to assist the humans, but found, instead, that the mechanical threat had been completely eliminated. She approached Captain Daeho with a mixture of gratitude and terror, while trying to understand how a species she had dismissed as primitive barbarians had accomplished something that no other civilization had ever managed. Captain Kim I must ask you why humanity chose to help us, despite our previous refusal of your alliance offer and our insults about your species being unworthy of galactic society," she said while her bridge crew listened to the conversation. Deho looked at the Volani admiral with the expression of someone who had just finished doing something necessary but unpleasant, and his response would become legendary throughout the galaxy. "Admiral, we did not save you because we are heroes, or because we want your gratitude, or because we forgive you for calling us barbaric spawn of a death planet," he said, while his voice carried the weariness of someone who had seen too much combat. "We saved you because that is what humans do when we encounter something that threatens innocent people, and we make sure that both we and others can continue to survive." The captain paused while looking at the debris field that had once been a harvester fleet, and his next words would be remembered by every species that heard them. "But you need to remember this moment, Admiral, and you need to remember what Deathworlders are capable of when we decide that something needs to be stopped." His voice became harder as he continued speaking while the human fleet began preparations for the journey back to their own territory. "You need to pray that you never give us reason to consider your people a threat, because we have just demonstrated that we can erase entire fleets from existence when we decide that is what needs to happen." The Volani Republic immediately petitioned for full alliance status with the Terran Defense Force, while other species throughout the galaxy took note of what had happened in the Theta Nexus system. The humans were not just warriors or even predators, but something far more dangerous, because they were protectors who possessed the capability to destroy civilizations and the wisdom to know when mercy was a luxury they could not afford. News of the battle spread through galactic communication networks, and every species that heard the story understood that the humans were not the primitive barbarians they had appeared to be, but something that defied easy classification. The human fleet departed the battle zone, leaving behind a dead star system and a lesson that would influence galactic politics for generations about what happened when you threatened something that the Deathworlders had decided. To protect Captain Deho, Kim returned to Earth with the knowledge that his species had earned both respect and fear from their galactic neighbors, and that humanity would never again be dismissed as insignificant primitives. The Harvester Swarm had been completely eliminated, and the galaxy had learned that there were worse things than mechanical predators, because evolution on a death world creates protectors who will do anything necessary to ensure that civilization continues to exist.